Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jared the Movies. I haven't been around a while, since March, whenever it was last, maybe April. I've been busy with work, and I've also been interviewing certain celebrities out there that I've made friends with on Facebook, one which I've discussed already, Joe Sholin. I've also interviewed Robert Davi, who many of you might know from The Goonies. And a film he also directed, a wonderful film called The Dukes, which also starred Chaz Palminteri. And Fred Sorensen, who played Jock in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the co-pilot that helps Indiana Jones escape in the opening sequence. So, and Leslie Hoffman, a professional stuntwoman, ex-stuntwoman, whom I will talk about in a later show. So today I want to talk about Orson Welles, which is what I had promised I would do in my last show, and his uncompleted films. Now, many of you know Orson Welles as the director of Citizen-Kane, which is often on the greatest movies list, from everyone from AFI to British Film Institute. A lot of people highly regard this picture, and deservedly so. And also, many of you that were alive during well, I was alive during the 70s, but those who can recall the Paul Mason commercials, or Masson, the wine commercials Orson Welles did, that's where a lot of people know him from. He's acted in more films than he's directed. Everything from The Muppet Movie to Butterfly to Catch-22 to Treasure Island to being the narrator in Transformers the movie, the animated picture from 1986. So he's had a longevity as an actor. As a director, he's made many films, but many have not been seen by the public because they were uncompleted. This had been a bone of contention for a long time with the investors in regards to Orson Welles. He was the kind of director that liked to immerse himself in his films and didn't like finishing them. And there are a few that I can mention quickly. The Merchant of Venice is a picture that actually I believe was completed, but it was, the negative was stolen, or at least that's what the claim is. Probably that's changed since then. There was also Don Quixote, a film that he actually started shooting back in 1955. And it was actually put together for a film festival in 1992, but Oya Kodar is Welles' co-star and lover for more than 20 years. Decried that picture and said that that's not what Welles had intended. It was edited and put together in a way that didn't resemble Welles. I've never seen Don Quixote, so I can't comment on that. But there are many other uncompleted films, but the most famous or infamous uncompleted film is The Other Side of the Wind. Now, this is a picture that Welles had worked on from 1970 to 1976. And it's a film about a aging film director named Jake Hannaford, played in the film by John Huston, who's trying to make one last picture that will have some sex and violence. And he is having trouble getting completion funds. And the studio is nervous about the picture because it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And dailies are shown, and they have no idea what this film is really about. But it's a very personal film for Orson Welles because obviously Jake Hannaford is modeled on Orson Welles himself. In fact, Orson Welles was called Jake for many years by Frank Sinatra. So there are personal touches in addition to Peter Bogdanovich, who's in the picture playing a hotshot young film director named Brooks Otterlake, originally played by Rich Little. And so there's this, not animosity, but almost a friction between these two, because the young director can get films made because he's a box office draw, and Jake Hannaford is having problems. There are all kinds of people in this picture. Mercedes McCambridge, Susan Strasberg, who plays a Pauline Kael film critic type. Dennis Hopper, the late Dennis Hopper, is also in it. Quite a few people. And the issue with the film has always been completion funds, which I will discuss right now. In fact, this may be interesting for many of you who would understand Peter Bogdanovich's recent quote, who's trying to get the film edited and put together, that Welles made a mess of things at the time of shooting this picture. So here's a clarification of the financing for Other Side of the Wind. Welles raised $1 million for Other Side of the Wind himself, and received a further $1 million from a Paris-based Iranian company, headed by Mehdi Bosheri, who happened to be the Shah of Iran's brother-in-law. At this point, a Spanish investor embezzled around $250,000 from the production and disappeared into Europe. The Iranian company agreed to provide further funding to replace the missing cash on the condition that they received a higher percentage, with the result being that the Paris-based Iranian company, and I can't pronounce the names, I don't know my French, finally owned around 80% of the film and were denying Welles the right to final cut. And at this point, the Iranian Revolution happened. The Shah of Iran fell, and the Ayatollah Khomeini, again we're talking now 30 years ago, came to power, and all foreign assets, including the negative of Orson Welles' final film, came under the Ayatollah's jurisdiction. So the film was kept in a Paris vault. That seems to be what's happened with the picture. The cinematographer of the picture, Gary Graver, who has also passed on, had presented a 2-hour cut in Connecticut many years ago that was put together, I think, probably very hastily, but it was just to get interest in the picture and trying to get completion funds, which is still a problem because the financing is coming from many, many different sources. And this has been the story of Welles' life for many years. So I'm hoping that between Oya Kodar, who is also in Other Side of the Wind, and Peter Bogdanovich, please release this film somehow. 40 minutes of it with a documentary attached to it would be more than ample for those of us that want to see at least what Welles was trying to do with this last film. Of course, 40 minutes of it were edited by Welles, and the rest of it has not been edited in terms of what perhaps Welles had intended. And I imagine they're still working on that. But I just hope this gets a release. Showtime had interest, then they sort of balked, and so far nobody knows for sure what's ever going to happen with The Other Side of the Wind. But let's hope someday we get to see it. There is a wonderful documentary called Orson Welles' One-Man Band that features excerpts from Welles' incomplete films, including The Merchant of Venice, of course Other Side of the Wind, and many other films that he had made. The Dreamers, also another one. It's a fascinating documentary. Look for it. It's actually in the F for Fake 2-disc DVD from Criterion collection. So do check that out. And hopefully someday we'll get to see The Other Side of the Wind in some way, some format. But because of Welles' reputation, it precedes him as the incomplete wizard, the one that loved to just make films but never wanted to stop making them. Who knows what we'll ever see of it. So let's hope. Let's hope. I'm praying, Peter, if you're watching, Oya Kodar, make this film available in some way, whether it's just the 40 minutes and a documentary, the behind the scenes. I don't care. Show us something. More than just the fragments that we've seen for the last 15, 20 years now. And so this is Jerry at the Movies, and that's it for Orson Welles. There's probably more to say in the future, and maybe at a later date I'll expand a little bit more on Orson Welles. Next time, a discussion on Leslie Hoffman, the